I have the privilege today of interviewing the man, the myth, the legend behind Miskatonic Books. Larry Roberts has joined us. Larry, thank you for coming on to the show today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Always been a fan of your work and Anathema for that matter. So yeah, it's all my pleasure. Glad to be
Your
here.
your endorsement check is in the mail. For our listeners and our viewers who are not aware of who you are and what you're all about, why don't you give us a Cliff Notes version or a lengthy Odyssey version of your background story?
Okay. Well, I've been selling books as a bookseller in various fashion in various different ways for at least 30 some odd years now. Started out in my early 20s, and I was a book scout. At the time, this was back in the 80s, where they actually had bookstores that you went to. The internet wasn't around at that particular point in time, so there was a lot more independent booksellers out there. So what I would do is I would go to these independent booksellers, find out what they needed, because it was hard for them to leave their shops and go book searching. So basically, they would tell me what they want. I would go travel and find these books that they were looking for, or books that I thought that they may be interested in. And then I would sell it to them, and then they would sell them to their customers. So I would have to go out there and find these books at really good prices so that I could make some money on it, and at the same time they could as well. So I did that in my early 20s, and that, paid the rent a lot at the time. And so that's where I really learned the book business is just by dealing with a lot of different booksellers, finding out, that all of them have their specialties, and they are very good at those specific specialties, but other bookstores may not be good at other specialties and they still carry the books because they're a general bookstore. So I would go in there and find bargains that they didn't really know they had. And then I would sell them to those dealers that was their specialty, so to speak. So I had to be kind of a specialist in all those areas, in various different areas. But for the most part, my specialty at that particular time, I would call myself something of an expert in that area, would be science fiction, horror, literature, from, Poe to modern day was really kind of my specific specialty area at that time in my early 20s.
So not
After,
only, yes, go ahead.
yeah, no, after that, what I started doing was I started collecting myself because I just love books. And one of the ones that I really loved collecting was small press limited edition horror titles that were, signed and numbered, exactly pretty much what we have in the occult genre, where, they're pretty much the same type of stuff, only they're literature and they're horror, dark fantasy, science fiction kind of stuff. So I was collecting these things. And as a young man, I was early, I got married very young at 20. And so we started a family early, and my wife was going, "You can't keep buying these expensive books. You just can't keep doing it. I mean, we have a family to start here. Eventually we want to move out of, the rental and get something that is more, that kind of thing." So what I did was I called the publishers and I asked them, "How many of your books would I have to purchase to get a wholesale discount?" So what I did was instead of buying, my copy, I bought 5 copies, and then I had to go out and find people to buy the other 4 so I could get mine for free. And so that allowed me to keep collecting these books. So what I would do is I'd put them in my backpack, carry them to work with me, and I started just kind of selling them to fellow, people that I worked with at work. I worked in a winery, and so a lot of these people, some of them were readers too, and I would just turn them on to these books, and they started collecting them as well. So I had a built-in kind of clientele at work after building that up. So I was able to continue collecting at that point in time. Then I decided that I was going to start, really making book selling, a side job, but make it, to where it was important to me. Like this was a real business, not me just collecting. So I set up a phone number. I started at that time, there was no internet still, right? So you had to create catalogs, and then you would have to advertise in magazines and places like this, that people who were collectors would sign up for your catalog. So I did that under Larry Roberts Bookseller. And what I really didn't have a lot of books on hand to be selling as a big bookseller with it. So what I did was, again, I called a bunch of dealers and I said, how much will you pay me if I sell your books for you? Some of your books. And they told me they'd give me 20%. So if I could get 20%, what I would do is I'd add their books to my catalog. All right. And so it was a much slower process. This wouldn't even be able to work these days because everybody wants their book shipped. Amazon, the Amazon effect, everybody wants their book shipped in 24 hours. But at that time, somebody would call you, tell you they wanted a book. I would call the person who had the book and say, I got it. I want to buy that book. I would, send them the cash for the book. The person would be sending me their check. And so there was a lot of time for all this to take place. I had to wait for their check to clear. I had to, so there was like weeks and weeks to get the book and for the check to clear so it was plenty of time for me to look like I had this enormous catalog when in effect I really didn't. But that allowed me to continue to build my bookstore with not having a whole lot of inventory at the time. And it worked out well. I liked these. The next stage was I really liked these horror limited edition titles. So I decided I wanted to start publishing these myself. And in 2002, we did our first publication under one of my horror imprints. And we eventually have published well over 150 titles, limited edition horror titles, signed and numbered stuff by the time I stopped publishing the horror. And in 2008, we won a Bram Stoker Award for excellence in publishing. So that kind of elevated us to the point where I could do it full time, didn't have to really work at the winery anymore. And so at that particular time, we were working full time in the book business, publishing and book selling and that kind of thing. So, but then not too long after that, we had, the 2008, 2009 great crash, and things like collectibles and stuff are the first thing to stop. People, hey, that's something that I can do without. I need food as opposed to and shelter as opposed to maybe these collectible books. So I think it just got to the point where it was oversaturated, and I think the writing quality was diminishing because of so much stuff going out. And I think that people just went like, I've had enough, for a while. And I think that was a good time for them to do that. Well, at that particular point in time, I was still Miskatonic Books, and I was kind of going towards the weird tales, classic horror, ghost stories, M.R. James, that kind of H.P. Lovecraft, that kind of stuff. But the whole thing just really wasn't there from a sales standpoint. Yes, you would make some sales in that too, but it just wasn't enough for a full bookstore and to do it, really full time. So I started looking around, and I've always been into the occult. I just didn't know, to be completely honest, that they had a genre that was similar to the one that I was in before, but for nonfiction occult titles. But as I started looking at these, I'm going like, these are beautiful. These are wonderful. So I started seeding the store with some of these, and I was very excited about getting them in the store because I found this hugely interesting and something that I would like to have in my library as well. So I started adding some of these titles to inside with the Lovecraftian weird tales. And they just they just really took over to where our weird tales horror titles are about this much. And, the occult stuff is far outweighs. But there is some really good cross-pollination there. There is a lot of people that really like both of those kind of the cosmic horror stuff and the ghost stories, the M.R. James style stuff. And so I think it works pretty well. And the cross-pollination has done really well. So really here we are. We've been, having under Miskatonic Books under, with the majority of occult titles in there has been about 12 years now doing that specifically.
How many titles or how many publishing houses do you carry or have you carried?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We'll carry as many as we can. So, if you go to our website, there's a place on our website where you can look at it and you click on it and it'll just give you a list of all of the publishers, but not even then. Those are the ones that we really focus. These are our focus. But there's probably at least 15, 20 there, not counting, the smaller ones that are there too, serious publications, stuff like that, that are smaller imprints that we may not have because they just don't have enough stuff coming out to have a full page devoted to their stuff. But
Right.
Jack, Grayle and I are starting a new imprint this year, Araxes Press. So
That's exciting news.
yeah, so and we've already got our first publication in the pipeline. It is Thai Occult 2 by Sakyant.
Mhm.
And so we've already got the manuscript, everything's contract signed. So we are in, we're in the editing right now, and we'll move into getting it to the printer and binder probably in about 4 weeks.
It's
So
exciting.
yeah, I'm excited about it. So it's I'm going to bring a lot of the stuff that I have done through publishing. And my problem is that I'm so busy selling books and packing books and shipping books and doing all that kind of stuff that I really haven't had an opportunity to really do more publishing, which is my background. So I did some stuff with Azoth Press, with gateways through light and shadow, and so stuff like that. With published several, one, two, three, four, 5 books from John Michael Greer, on the Shadow of the Ideas, the Dolman Arch volumes 1 and 2, and then I did 2 Lovecraft novels of his, The Weird of Holly and The Weird of Holly Innsmouth. Yeah, so and what is it? Weird of Holly, Kingsport, and The Weird of Holly Innsmouth. Yeah. So, and Liber Spirituum, we did on the Shadow of the Ideas, the Bruno title, which was a lot of fun, which was a Greer title too. So yeah, I'd like to get into some more on that, and I think that Jack will help me get some of those manuscripts in, and he can really work on the manuscript editing part of it, and I can really work on the creating these beautiful tomes that I think people will really enjoy and love to have on their shelf.
And speaking of loving to have things on your shelf, obviously you've surrounded yourself with books. Have you considered contributing to the genre and putting an offering out there for people to add to
I've
their
thought about
shelves?
it. Yeah. And there's, after years and years and years of journal writing, I did write a book one time called Collecting Darkness, which was on collecting within the genre, collecting horror within the horror genre. So I've done some nonfiction stuff in the past, and I would really love to do some stuff, maybe within a Golden Dawn, or even in, as you know, kind of my patron deity is Santa Muerte. So I'd really like to do something along the lines with her as well. I'm just not sure how well it would be received coming from a gringo like myself, but I have just been, passionate about her for well over a decade, and so is the whole family. Yeah.
So you mentioned the Golden Dawn. How long
Mhm.
have you been active with the Golden Dawn?
I'm still active now. Been involved with a temple now for, I'd have to look at my neophyte ritual certificate, but it was at least 8 years ago, 8, 9 years ago now that, yeah. And I'm not able to participate in the temple like I was because I moved. So the temple is no longer in the same state I'm in, although I do participate electronically with um, you know, with the temple. So when they're having the rituals and stuff like that, they will have it on Zoom for those, people that are traveling or whatever. So I can still participate, which is really nice. What kind of got me started down that road is that I got into Freemasonry really early. When I say early, I was in my early 30s and was in the Blue Lodge for a while, which I don't know if you know much about Freemasonry, but that's the first 3 degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my grandfather, my father's father,
Mm-hmm.
was a Mason, and that was actually like a family tradition. His
Yeah.
father was a Mason. His father's father was a Mason, and it's wild because my own father did not want to join the Masons, and that was it was like a serious breach of etiquette because
Yeah.
my uncles were Masons, my male cousins were Masons, and
Right.
the minute you end that family tradition, it's like he did what?
Yeah. I would, none of my family were involved in masonry. In fact, the place that the Blue Lodge that I was in California at this time, still working at the winery. And so I just kept driving by it every day and knocking on the door, and I I'd call, leave messages, just nothing until I just, I seen some cars out in the parking lot and I just kicked on the door till somebody opened it, and just like, I'm not going to be denied today. I'm done. I'm going to talk to somebody today about, and so they finally opened the door. I'm like, yeah, fill out the application. We'd love to. So, got my master Mason degree in that. And I was really kind of disillusioned with it, to be honest, in the beginning, because Blue Lodges are so different. Blue Lodges, you go to different, and some of them will be like the Blue Lodge that I was involved with in Portland was very esoteric. In fact, its name was Esoterica. That was and so, I mean, they were very much into precise ritual. I mean, the way everything was done was very, very, very regimented. I've said it before, and I think I've offended some Freemasons when I say it, but Blue Lodge to me was really like the boot camp of Freemasonry. I mean, everything is regimented. Everything is, you got to do this. You put your hands here. You put your feet this way when you're talking to, I mean, it's very, very strict and regimented. But the first lodge I went to, it was just a bunch of old men who wanted to beat me at pinochle and take my money. You know what I mean? But you find another one and it's like, okay, well, these guys are into what I'm into. You know what I mean? I want the esoteric side of me. I really didn't give a damn if who laid a cornerstone somewhere in history in a building or whatever. That just wasn't for me. The Masonic history, a lot of people are really into. Me, that wasn't it. I want to know how, like they say, I mean, what got me there is they said, we make good men better. Well, I wanted to be better, particularly, mentally, spiritually, all of this, I wanted to be better. So I went like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And luckily I didn't give up on it, because then I moved to Oregon and joined the Scottish Rite, which is really what I always wanted to join, because the Scottish Rite is far more hermetic than the Blue Lodge ever thought about being. We do 29 degrees on top of those three. We don't do those three. That's only done in Blue Lodge. Then you move to, if you want what they would consider more light, then you would go to the Scottish Rite or Knights Templar. Those two, one of them is really more Christian based, and one of them is more hermetic based. Well, I was far more hermetic based than I was Christian based. Not that I grew up Pentecostal, so I mean, I was very, hardcore Christian growing up. My family wasn't. Yeah, I mean, really hardcore. I mean, I've said it on another podcast recently, but we didn't dance with snakes, but we went to tent revivals and stuff where they did. We were that kind of hardcore Pentecostal. Yeah, it was a different kind of childhood. I can say that.
Well, hey, you are preaching to the snake handling choir. Growing up Pentecostal myself, going to tent revivals.
Yeah,
we did everything but handle snakes and drink strychnine, but we certainly did our fair share of speaking in tongues and
us too. Yeah,
laying hands on each other.
Yeah. When people are talking about, they've never seen an invocation where somebody's been possessed by, like I've seen that growing up from birth.
Yeah,
where they were just like, people were invoking the Holy Spirit and flopping around on the ground. I've likened it to, and again, it's a little derogatory, so I apologize in advance, but it's Christian voodoo is what it is. That's what Pentecostal religion is. It's a lot of what is in voodoo is in the Pentecostal religion. It is really folk magic, at its
without a doubt. It's a good thing that you mentioned that, because a lot of people, especially those who do not have that experience within that type of spiritual paradigm, wouldn't be able to draw those conclusions. And I agree, it is something that could be taken the wrong way, but that's the language that we have that we could use to describe this. Growing up, did you have any experiences with the malevolent spirits that we former Pentecostals have been taught to fear? And
well, the thing that and probably the real reason that I got out of the Pentecostal religion when I was, as soon as I was an adult enough to go like, I'm not doing this anymore, and my parents couldn't do anything about it, was that the immense amount of pressure they put on people who, like, I mean, in the Pentecostal religion, the devil is constantly around you
Yeah.
and just waiting for you to do something wrong, you know. So for, a young boy, going through puberty, you're constantly, at odds. And I think it just messes you up in your head, like these things like, I'm a horrible person. Why am I thinking these thoughts? Why am I?
Yeah.
It's because it's natural. The reason you're thinking those thoughts, you're meant to procreate, but at that particular time, you're going to go right to, in fact, you're going to get possessed by the devil is what you're going to do. And then, and I remember at around 9 years old, I seen this most frightening thing that scared the hell out of me as a young kid. I look at the trailer now and it's just funny, but it was called Beyond the Door, an old,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, seeing that as like at like 9, I'm just thinking like, it just like the devil's there. It just it just literally scared me to death. Yeah. And that was because of that upbringing, and I brought up my boys a lot different. They're in their 30s now, but it's like, hey boys, those feelings, those things, you should be feeling those. Those are the things you should be feeling. And it's okay to feel that way. You know what I mean? So that was a lot of the reason that I left that religion, that the strictness of it and the inability to really be a good Christian, Pentecostal Christian. I'm not sure you can be a good Pentecostal Christian. I think you're always failing every day.
Yeah.
Every day you've done something that, a thought snuck up on you or, whatever. And that's a horrible way to live.
It is. It definitely is. And I remember growing up, there were several different needle points that my mother somehow collected either through yard sales or women in the church. But I distinctly remember a needle point that says we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And that of course is biblical
Sure.
scripture. But seeing that every day, being reminded of that every day, it's like, my gosh, you're just putting this unattainable
Yeah.
goal in front of me, making me feel awful.
It just creates so much anxiety when you're trying to do what your parents are telling you, trying to do what the church is telling you, trying to do, but it's impossible. It's just impossible. Um, so that's the reason that I left. And it was a good move. And, now one of my kids are very spiritual and one of them just isn't. He's, that's his choice. That's their choice. And, and you never know. I mean, spirituality comes on people later in life sometimes
Yeah.
too. It's just always been in my life. It's just always been a part of who I am. More so because, after I got out of the Pentecostal church, it's been more on the Hermetic side.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's always been a part of my life. Now, getting back to your question of like, did I ever like really see anything? Are you talking about entity wise, that kind of thing with in the Pentecostal church? Was
Yeah,
that
entity wise, any
I have
instances where
never
you
in my
witnessed a
entire occult career, so to speak, ever seen a physical manifestation of an entity. Never. I'm going to be completely honest. I've done magic a long time, decades. And no, do I know when magic's working? Yes. You get to the point when you've done magic enough, when it's good magic and when like this isn't working. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
definitely.
Just no, you get that. But about 10 years ago, I went to a botanica in Portland, Oregon. And this botanica, I was getting some incense, getting some candles, getting those kind of things, just general occult paraphernalia kind of stuff. And they had a Santa Muerte temple. You had to walk through a hallway and it was in the back. And so I, being the occultist that I am, like, I'm going to check this out. You know what I mean? And this was a real botanica. In fact, you walk by as you're going in, there was a door open, and you can tell that's where they were doing the Santeria and the stuff like that. You can see where they were slaughtering some animals and doing some stuff right here but you walk past that and you go to the right, and there's this temple that has this enormous, well, I would say a little bit bigger than it's about life size Santa Muerte, and then just a bunch of other littler ones around and all the lights were off, and all they had was just a bunch of candles on the ground. And man, you could just feel the energy in that place when you walked in. Just like, I mean, the hairs on your arms are standing up and stuff. I mean, the energy was, I've never felt a more magically charged place,
Yeah.
you know, that I've done magic for in the ever, you know, even in my own temple in my home. I've never felt that. And so I go over there, light it, you know, say a little prayer, and then something, which I believe was Santa Muerte, come around and put their arm around me, pushed me towards them, and laid their head on my shoulder. You know, like it was frightening, scary, very scary, but it wasn't a frightening grab. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was more of an embrace, like, you know, welcome kind of, you know what I mean? So wow. I mean, that had out of all the occult stuff that I've done my whole life, you go through and you want that one, you know,
Yeah.
show one, you know, like give me. And so it just it really kind of changed my life at that point. I went home, set up an altar. My At that point, I kind of set it up very similar to what we have in Masonry called a chamber of reflection, where you basically have, you know, I had um stuff there to remind you of your mortality, a memento mori, basically. Basically, I had an hourglass in there. I had bread and salt, and I had, you know, the mercury, sulfur, and salt in there. I had, you know, and I had a skull right there just to remind me. And I'd go in that chamber every day and just kind of remind myself that, you know, you've just taken one less breath than you're going to take the rest of your life. You know what I mean? And, you know, I don't know, man, when you do that, what I have found is that even if you're having a bad day, your breakfast tastes better. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You
Absolutely.
know what I mean? It just, and so it has become a family deity to us. It has, you know, a patron saint for, we have a complete room in the house. And I believe I sent you the picture of that. And if
Yeah.
you know, put that
Absolutely beautiful.
in the show notes, you can. But I mean, my wife hand sewn her dress. We have, you know, complete alt, and you know, we go in there, the family, every day at different times. Like, you know, it's a personal thing because we all got to, you know, we die alone. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you may have people around you, but they can't go with you. It's like you're going by yourself, and so it's one of those things where you go in there, and you know, we light a candle, light some incense, and just say, you know, hey, thanks for today, and you know, and when it does come time, hopefully it's a good death. You
Yeah.
know, so it just it's a reminder daily of just how precious life is, and so that's what that room does for us. And it's a little macabre, yes. The Santa Muerte is a reaper image, but I mean, there's 4 human skulls in there, 9 femur bones around her. So it is a place that reminds you that, you know, this is where you're heading. This is your future, you know. So make every minute last, enjoy your family, enjoy, you know, the things in life that you can enjoy, because they won't be around forever.
And I think that's a healthy philosophy because far too often, especially here in the West, where we're influenced by Western
Mm-hmm.
thinking and the rational over the spiritual, I think that we lose sight, we distance ourselves so much from the natural life cycle that
Mm-hmm.
when death comes, it's completely clinical.
Yeah.
I've experienced it myself. I used to work in the emergency department of the local hospital, and
Mm-hmm.
shadowed hospital chaplains and was a chaplain at one point. And it's it's so disheartening to witness that taking place when this is this is real, this is a
Right.
reality,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that we need to be cognizant of and not distance ourselves from.
Right. It almost becomes, and I read an essay from some PhD somewhere, but it was basically about how a lot in the West we see death as something not only derogatory but dirty.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, this is diseased now. We can't touch it. We can't. We have to separate ourselves from it. And
Right.
I'm just not sure that's healthy. You know what I
It's
mean?
absolutely not healthy.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that is a good, you know, and I think that's why there's so much fear of death, you know, um, out there, is because, you know, it's, oh my God, we don't want to see it. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to, you know, actually um, interact, so to speak, and absorb what's going on here, because it's a natural part of life. And so again, the chamber, of reflection reminds us of that every day. And it's kind of almost like the samurai kind of code, where it's like every day a samurai believed they were going to die. Every
Right.
day, I'm dying today. You know what I mean? And so when you're gonna when you believe you're gonna die, you know what I mean? It's hard to sleep because you want to do so much more before the day comes. Or you want, you know what I mean? You want to enjoy those things. You want to crack open the bone and suck out the marrow. You know, you want to live life,
Yeah.
carpe diem kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And it truly is. What's the difference between a day and 100 years? I mean, it's a flash in the
Mhm.
scheme of things. You know what I mean? So, man, do what you love. Do what your passions are. You know, and I think that a lot of times, for me, I've noticed that when you do those things, the money will follow. You know, you may not ever be, Bill Gates or somebody like that, but you're going to do all right. You know, do what you're passionate about, do what you love. And I have a feeling that other people are going to feel the same way about what you're doing, you know. So anyway, take that from an old man. In that Botanica, in that Santa Muerte temple, I mean, that changed my life completely. Um, and let me know that there is things out there that are physical as well. You know what I mean? That can do things. Not and even in our temple, I mean, we'll go in there sometimes and the candles are lit all by themselves, just lit. Like, I don't know how that happened, but great. And my kids, when they came to live with us to help work with the business and stuff, when they started going in there and started seeing candles lighting by themselves and stuff, it was a little off-putting to me. But yeah.
What's happening
Yeah,
here?
what have we got ourselves into? Yeah, but yeah, no, it's really good, and I find magic and folklore and all of that just super fascinating. You know, super fascinating.
Is that something that you've had with you since childhood? That's always
Well,
piqued your interest?
I think it was ingrained in me from the Pentecostal religion, just seeing just seeing spirits being in people, and how these how people, rational people that I knew and loved, that would never act like that, you
Mm.
know what I mean, or never be in that kind of compromising positions where they're on the ground in almost an epileptic,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about. And then
Doing
speaking
the
in,
worm for Jesus.
yeah, exactly. And it's it so it's just always been with me. I've always believed that because I've seen it since I was a child, so I
How do you
don't ever
think
remember a time not seeing it, so.
how do you think that young Larry
Mhm.
would view current Larry at this present time?
Oh, horribly. I would be, like the ultimate sinner for sure, be going to hell, dealing with, because, I have invoked angels. I've invoked, I haven't ever done any of the Goetia, kind of stuff, but done a recent mentor of mine, Joe Wolf, great magician. But he was doing all 72 angels of the Shemhem Ephresh in his home temple. And I would go there and we would invoke these angels and go through them. And yeah, it was and I think he passed like 3-4 weeks ago now, but it was yeah, amazing magician, amazing human being, and a wonderful magician. It's nice being able to kind of be mentored under somebody who is that knowledgeable, who's been
Mm.
doing it for 40 some odd years, and an adept in a high adept in the arts. And yeah, it was nice having him around. And I even published one of his works one time in a chapbook. But yeah, he's unfortunately passed. But yeah, he was definitely a huge mentor to me for sure, particularly with the angel working stuff. When I first started doing angel work, and really just up until not too long ago, I could never get the vision. Like when I'm doing a lesser banishing ritual or whatever, I could never really get a view of the angel itself. What I got was almost these energy blobs that were out in each of the
Mm.
four corners. You know what I mean? It was almost like, you probably are too young to know, but I remember, like with Star Trek, the first Star Trek, when they'd have a blob coming at them that was that some other ship had
Hey, I've
shot.
seen reruns.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's the way these things were envisioned to me. They were just these power energy fields of, but I never really got a vision of, like you would see in like a dark song, that kind of, just this amazing angelic being here, I just didn't. And, I'm slowly getting to the point where those kind of visualizations are coming to me now, rather than just energy spots, you know what I mean? Or, and that didn't make it any less, interesting, foreboding, or magical. It just, I just didn't quite. And maybe it is because of the Pentecostal religion, because Pentecostal religion, for us, angels were deemed a little different than they are in other. And I've talked to people about this, and they go like, holy cow. Like, for when we were taught, I mean, angels obeyed you. You're the one that had the spark of God in you. And if you commanded angels, angels were going to do what you told them to do. They didn't have a choice of not doing otherwise, Well, as you get into the more, Golden Dawn-ish kind of stuff, you're kind of almost to the, I can't remember if it was Anselm or Aquinas, we're basically saying like, you're below the angels now. But as soon as you pass and you go above the, like we didn't have any of that stuff, in the Pentecostal religion. No, you're above angels. You're the closest thing to God that, that is in existence right now. They're definitely important beings, but you have free will and you have the spark of God and you're made in his image kind of talk, you know what I mean? And if you are wholesome enough and pure enough, when you give a command, they're going to do what you tell them to do. They'd be afraid not to. That kind of, that's which is different. You probably heard some of that stuff too, but yeah. And so angel work for me was kind of almost rewiring my brain, to get it to the point where, particularly when we're doing, because for me, I do a lesser banishing ritual. I do an invoking ritual every morning and a banishing ritual at night before bed, just as a general, practice.
So you've got the family temple, you've got this enriching practice, you've got this, these experiences going back years. Has that had any effect? I know you said that one of your sons is not spiritual in any way, but has that had effects on your other son? Are they more spiritually engaged like
know.
you? Or?
No, they know. I mean, it's not something, I mean, it's the temple's in the house. So they've seen it. They wanted to take pictures of it and stuff. I just don't like other people other than myself taking pictures of a temple to, that kind of stuff. So I'll take a picture, and if they want to, see the picture, they can. But, and like you, I don't mind other people that are other occultists going like, looking at this and going like, oh, that's, that's a different temple. That's a different kind of a setup. Because even with Santa Muerte, I mean, it's definitely a, comes from Mexico, comes from South America. But so I put my own influence in it, my own Western occultism, kind of fuse it together, where a lot of people see that as like, that's no bueno, that's no good. So, but for me, it works. And it's always, I've had a great relationship with that deity. I've tried to do others like I'm really good friends with Mark from Primal Craft and his Hecate stuff, and I've tried to work with Hecate and got the statue and everything, but just did not work with Santa Muerte. You can't have those two in the same general area.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I have heard others say the very same thing.
That's interesting. I'm glad that that's the case, because
I've encountered.
Is that me, or is that?
I've encountered a number of people that I don't want to say that they quote unquote collect quote unquote death deities, but that seems to be the spiritual current that they gravitate towards. And I remember one individual who was devoted to Hecate. They were interested in incorporating the lady into their practice, and they got an icon of her, and they tiptoed into it, and they were like, nope. Oil and water, it's not mixing.
No, they do not. So we don't have any other statues in the chamber at all, just her. And I mean, it's a big room.
The pictures that you sent me is quite impressive.
We it was a family project. We have an area where in there that is what we have is our kind of our pet cemetery, for pets that have passed, and we have their ashes and stuff. So there's a shelf there of any pets that have passed, and then we move over, and then there's a place for divination if you want to do, tarot cards, whatever. And then you go a little further, and that's my scrying area where I do. I have a 14-inch obsidian mirror where I do my scrying from there. And I've really tried tarot and stuff, but nothing just works for me as well as scrying does. Mm-hmm. I said this on another podcast the other day, and it was I got a lot of feedback on it, so I'll say it here too. I was traveling one time, and I just really felt the urge to like scry, just really. So I took out my my iPad and really cleaned it off really nice. Mm-hmm. Best scrying session I've ever had.
Yeah, it's a black mirror.
Oh my God, it's so reflective and so perfect. And so, I've gotten better stuff coming from that iPad than I do my 14-inch obsidian mirror that I paid way too much for. Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be practical.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's just like, I'm going to try this and try to just like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. So those of you out there who have an iPad, give it a shot. If you're a scryer, I think you'll find that it works really, really well.
Just make sure you wash your hands and clean the mirror.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Magic is a lot easier than I think a lot of us think. I think we, make it more complex than it needs to be.
Sometimes I'm inclined to think that we make it complex because if we attain some sort of or engage with some sort of power or entity outside of ourselves, we know it's going to unsettle us. Mm-hmm. So rather than engage actively, rather than practice actively, we couch ourselves in the armchair. We, write these lengthy tomes. And again, I'm not critical of that. I think that is a worthwhile pursuit. I think that we owe a great deal to the scholars, historians, the armchair academics, and armchair magicians. But roll up your sleeves, get out there, get your hands dirty, roll around in the dirt if you have to.
I have done a lot of ceremonial magic, and I've done a lot of folk magic, and folk magic has always seemed to work easier for me. And I think a lot of times that these people that are really, really into the high magic and the structure and the complexity of that, it gives them an angle to say the reason it didn't work because I just didn't quite have this. It gives them like it probably would have worked if I would have had my red slippers. I'm just saying that, I think that it can also become excuses for not working. Now, believe me, I know that there's high magicians out there. I've worked with some of them that are awesome, fantastic magicians, and it works for them very, very well. But I think every one of those that I've ever worked with, their egos are this.
Yeah.
They have zero ego. I mean, zero. It amazes me. We're just, the amount or lack of ego that they have. And I think that is one of the reasons that their magic works so well.
Yeah.
I usually judge a magician, to be completely honest, by ego. I can tell whether they're good magicians, really good magicians, at a level that I'll probably never achieve just by ego. If you get into those types that every time they see a sigil are going like, well, that's not the right sigil, or that's not the right, the constant corrector that this is the way it's supposed to be done, that kind of stuff. Magic just does not work that way. Has never worked that way for me anyway, So, I mean, there's times where outlines and things like that and things that people have done in the past may help you get, the ritual that you need to do, or at least give you a foundation of what you can do to and morph it to your own, magical self. But I'm not into that dogma of, the Goetia where it must be done this way. If you don't have this ring, what are you going to do? So that magic, and maybe people will say, magicians will say, well, that's why you've never had, an entity come into, physical, physical appearances because you're not doing it correctly. So
yeah,
who knows?
That may be the case, but they didn't have the same experience that you had in the presence of the lady in that shrine.
That's true, and to me, that was not, that was something that was, I wasn't even trying to do magic,
Mm.
but it was a magical experience,
Yeah.
and I think that a good magician will always be open to a magical experience, regardless of whether they're doing magic or not. You know, being aware of your surroundings and how things affect you, your ego, your spiritual self is what the work of a magician is first, or
Mhm.
maybe better spoken, the work of a mystic. Somebody who wants to better understand themselves and how they relate to the universe and the universe relates to them. So, and so maybe that's the reason I haven't seen, these in physical existences, because I'm just not that kind of magician. I'd rather get close to God than see an angel personally.
Mhm.
I'd rather be closer to God than to see that entity. That would be life changing, of course, but so would a better connection to God. And this is one of the reasons why I really liked Freemasonry, because that's what, Freemasonry is the stepping stone of making you a better person. And, this is the reason everybody's going like, well, they don't allow women in there. Well, the reason they don't allow women in there, and I'm not opposed to them doing that, but one of the reasons they don't is because we come there as men and we can talk openly about maybe some of the issues that we're having family wise,
Mhm.
with dating. You wouldn't be able to have those. And we teach each other how to be better husbands, better fathers, better brothers, better, we teach, not teach, but we, help each other become better
Yeah.
people, better community members, so that we can become, the next step is to be a better spiritual person.
Right.
You get those things out of the way first. And I think that's what Masonry is. Masonry is the stepping stone. We dance right around to the point where we're getting ready to open the veil with, circumambulations and stuff in Masonry, and then we stop. Right. Well, this is the reason why they started the Golden Dawn. I mean, these guys were all master masons. They're going like, we want to open the veil.
Yeah.
So they started the Golden Dawn. And so I think that was the next step for me too. It's like, and that was my stepping stone into getting into more magic, was Masonry. And then I think I told you, but in 2019 is when I got my 33rd degree in Washington, D.C., in Freemasonry. And it was definitely an experience. That was the most beautiful ritual I've ever been to. It takes about 3 hours, and it's in 3 different locations in Washington. It's a beautiful, beautiful ritual. Just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what degree my grandfather attained, but I do remember once my grandmother told me that when he came home, she said that it was like he had seen the face of God. And, she's Pentecostal too at the time. So, she said it's like he had seen the face of the Lord, and, he just, everything was new to him, and everything was just a new experience. And, sometimes I think about that and wonder, why was this tradition, this family tradition from father to son broken? And
Mm-hmm.
who knows? Maybe it's
Well, it
something that
doesn't
I'll
work
have to
for
explore.
everybody. Some
Yeah.
people just aren't set up for. Now, both of my sons are 32nd degree Masons, but a 33rd degree is a little different. 33rd degree is an invitation only. You have to be, and they only give, like for the state of Oregon, we get like one or two, what they call white caps. They can give one or two 33rd degrees for the entire state of Oregon every other year.
Wow.
So really only 1% of Masons become 33rd degrees, 33rd degree Masons. So it's a big deal. It's one of the, things that I'm most proud of in my life, is getting that and going through it. We sign a gold book. 33rd degree Masons sign this gold book that, I mean, it has the people who have signed that same book in history, and now I'm signing my name in it. You know what I mean? It was an amazing, it was just amazing.
That's
And it's a
incredible.
huge book. It's big gold cover on it. It's like, yeah, it was truly amazing. I wasn't I wasn't all that hip on Washington D.C. That's a hot, nasty place. Ick.
Yes,
But
it definitely is.
our temple there, the house of the temple, they call it, I think is, I mean, it's within walking distance to the White House. It's on the same street. You can just walk right to it, and it's just a beautiful building. The inside is just amazing. Yeah, it was like I said, it was true experience that, that I'm happy that I put in the work and the effort to be able to get it. And there's people who are Masons their whole life and work their whole life and they just don't. It has to be, you can never ask for it. If you ever ask for it, you're automatically never going to get it. It's an automatic. So
Yeah.
you can't ever ask for it. You can't ever, it's just one of those where what they call a sovereign grand commander will watch you over years. And the earliest you can get it in the Scottish Rite is 8 years. You have to be in the Scottish Rite 8 years before you can even be considered for it. And you have to get what's called a KCCH, Knight Commander Court of Honor, before you can even get that. And then once you get the Knight Commander Court of Honor, you got to wait another 4 years to even be considered for it. And then, there's just people that have been doing it their whole life and just never got it. Because it's just, they can only give out so many. And so, and I was able to get it in those 8 years. So it was pretty amazing to me too. And I worked really hard. In fact, I ran the Portland, they call them temples. They call it you have a valley and an orient is what they call it in the Scottish Rite. An orient is the state and a valley is the specific temple, Scottish Rite temple. So for me, I ran the Portland Scottish Rite temple. And the degrees here are amazing because we do them. They're not like in the Blue Lodge where they're more ritualistic, similar to the Golden Dawn kind of stuff. In the Scottish Rite, they're plays. So we in this place in at Portland had hand sewn costumes that were over 100 years old. Our backdrops and everything were hand painted over 100 years. It's in a vaudeville stage. We have the little mics. I mean, we're practicing over and over and over again to give these degrees. And I mean, we have organ playing and we have lights and sound. You have to hit a spot. It's actual acting and you have to
Wow.
memorize all your lines. I remember, like one of the ones that I was in, I think I had to memorize like 10 type pages of, of lines for when we do reunions and stuff like that. And in Portland, we do all 29 degrees. Most of them don't have enough people to do all the degrees. So it was really a pleasure to go through and be part of all 29 Scottish Rite degrees. And you were talking about your father coming back and just being a glow,
Grandfather.
or your grandfather. And one of the things that a lot of people, kind of kick on Masonry is that they say they're full of secrets, and the secrets are not to be kept from you. The secrets are far closer to, we don't want to tell you the ending because we want this ritual to have the impact it's supposed to have on
Yeah.
you. It's to change your life. And it's like a movie. If somebody's already told you how it ends, right? Here's the plot twist. You know what I mean? It's not going to have the same effect on you when you're watching it.
Oh,
You know
I'd
what I mean?
still watch it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll watch it, but would it have the same effect on you?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I've seen people with that same glow after they're, and that's what it's supposed to do. If ritual is done right and it's done with the right heart and with the right skill, it will change lives. It will, and it does. And, I think we've lost a little bit of that in Masonry where, I've heard of some people where they're reading lines now. Like we didn't read, there was no reading lines in, when at the Scottish Rite that I was at, no reading lines at all. You
Wow.
learned the lines. And
That's pretty
yeah,
rigorous.
yeah, it really was. And every month we had a ritual. So different people would rotate into those, and you had guys that could truly be professional actors. Some of them are so good, that it just. And then when we would have a reunion, the reunions when you bring in new members, and we did that twice a year, we would have 5 degrees, I believe it was 5, 7 degrees that we did through that weekend, that people could see. And you could tell the people that were going to stay just by the glow in their eyes when it was over. And that's what you really were working towards when you were sitting there night after night memorizing lines. And yeah, it just got to the point where I was memorizing stuff every day, every single day. Had to
I could not
memorize.
imagine.
And then it got to the point where memorizing is a lot like jogging or something like that. Your brain gets to the point where you can start doing it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it got to the point when even when I wasn't like going to be in next month's ritual, I'd memorize poems or something just to keep
Keep that muscle fresh. Yeah.
keep that mental or because, next month you're going to be doing it again. And the easier that stuff comes, the better it is, so it's definitely labor,
Yeah,
which is a big
definitely.
part of Freemasonry. So yeah, and there's even some lines in Freemasonry that talk about labor being prayer, or I said this in another podcast recently too, but it's he who works faithfully to attain a purpose by the work itself is praying to God. So if you're working for an altruistic, purpose for your community, for your family, you're praying. As far as God's concerned, you're in prayer, you're in connection with God when you're doing those kind of things. So I thought that was always a unique line, and one of the degrees that I was in.
Yeah, it does certainly sound biblical. I mean, it
Oh, it
reminds
sure.
me of,
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was a hymn or perhaps even a slogan that was used during some revival, but I remember uh, reading once about uh, our hearts bent in prayer is the true pursuit of God, something to that effect.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's
And
definitely a
words
language that I would speak.
and words are very important in Masonry, and I believe in Magick. I mean, we have the sacred word, the special. I mean, we have all these different words that mean different things, but they call them the word,
Right.
the sacred word. They're just so many different ones, and each of them have a different aspect in Masonry that is part of the creative process. And if you look at that, I mean, everything's created with words.
Mm.
God created the world with, or the universe with words, right? And then we have John 1:1. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, words are, to me, are extremely important in Magick and in building anything, or in the building. I would say in the creation of something, words are important in that creation process.
Yeah, both the written and spoken word.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One and the same, as far as I'm concerned. Now you get some of the vocalization and stuff like that, I think, when you're doing mantras and stuff like that help get you into that. But words, whether they're written or whether they're spoken, or whether, when we're speaking and when we're creating with anything, we're creating with words in one fashion or another. That could be a sigil, which is, to me, is just another, letter of a word. So it's all part of the communication process and commanding things into existence.
So, speaking of the written word, earlier you had mentioned the potentiality
Mm-hmm.
of writing a book to the lady that you are
I would
devoted
really
to.
like that. And I've in my prayers and stuff, when I go in there, when she gives me the go, it'll happen. When she tells me, like, that's what I want you to do, I'll do it. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue studying and getting it ready for the time that she says go.
Larry, we have covered a great deal of topics:
Yeah, you're
magic,
probably going to have to
mayhem.
edit 90% of it out, but yeah, but take in there what you think is worthy and cut out what you think is not. I'm not going to be in any way hurt in whatever you do to it.
I'm
So.
gonna leave it all in, and you and I will be canceled together because
Okay,
that's
sounds
that's the
good.
greatest
Yeah,
horizon to
yeah,
see.
yeah.
So
We'll blast it together.
so we've talked about magic, we've talked about mystery, we've talked about Santa Muerte, we've talked about Miskatonic. What's
Mm.
on the horizon next? What is the
Well, like I
next M to achieve?
well, one of the things that I want to do is I want to obviously expand. So what we're doing is we're bringing in a few more. I'd like to get to the point where we're bringing in more ritual kind of stuff, where we're
Hmm.
bringing in candles, or we're bringing in mala beads, or we're bringing in, just something, amulets.
So, to our viewers and our listeners, if they were interested in sending proposals or
Yeah, if they
potential,
have something that they make, and they can make to the point where we could, put some in the shop and give it a shot and see how it works. I think we're on the verge of doing that, because it used to just be my wife and I. We were doing it all, and it was just so much books going out, and then I was taking all the pictures and doing all. Well, now we have my son and my daughter-in-law that are here with us. So now it's just me looking for books all day long, looking for other products to put in the market, doing some more talking, with folks like you, and just trying to, make people aware of Miskatonic Books. We try to do everything we can to make books affordable because we know some of these can be expensive. So we
Oh
have
yeah.
layaways, we do layaway stuff so you have 4 months to pay it off for equal monthly payments. We know that some countries don't have a good banking system. They just
Nope.
don't. So we offered cryptocurrencies. So you can pay with cryptocurrencies and even get a discount. So you don't even have to go through a bank if you don't have one, or if you can't, don't have a good banking system that you can rely on. We really tried to make it to where everybody has an opportunity. And then if you sign up and you're logged in, you always get points. Eventually you're getting free stuff, with every purchase. So we're just trying to be as friendly and open to and making the experience as good as possible when you're purchasing from Miskatonic Books.
If you're a new viewer and would like to stay up to date with the latest from Bibliosophia, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for our channel.